Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. It is one of the biggest fights that can happen in the world of MMA today. It is certainly one of the biggest fights that could ever happen in the UFC, in the current UFC landscape with who is actually signed to the UFC. And it's funny, like after all this time, Jon Jones is still there. He's still the man to beat, okay? In this video today, we are going to be talking about the hypothetical matchup. We are going to be working our way through the fight between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. Who is the baddest man on the planet, or at least who is the baddest man in the UFC, since unfortunately, I don't think we are ever going to get Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. All right. As we work through this fight, let us remember together that this is MMA, and we love MMA so much because on fight week, anything can happen. I mean, from the time that fight is announced to the time the cage door closes until someone's hand is raised, anything can happen along those steps of the way. Someone can trip over a cable at the press conference. Someone can come in with staph infection. Someone can not make weight. Jon Jones can literally be about to enter the cage and the commission can look down at his mangled toe. Thanks for that, Chael Sonnen, and be like, you ain't going in the cage with that toe wrapped up to the foot like that, and the fight can get called off. It is madness once the fight actually gets made. So let us pretend, right, that Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall is going to be the next fight to happen. I know Stipe Miocic exists, but come on, let's face the facts. Tom Aspinall is the interim heavyweight champion. He has to be the one to fight Jon Jones next. Let's not tear each other apart in the comments about that right now. We can have that discussion later, but let us pretend that the next fight that is going to happen at International Fight Week is going to be Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. And in the words of maybe the true GOAT of MMA, on paper, Anthony Smith, who wins that fight? So Jon Jones would be coming into this fight at Madison Square Garden against Tom Aspinall after yet another very long layoff. A layoff where he is in recovery, which to Jon Jones seems to be code for doing a world tour and getting on the piss. Let's face it, the guy is behaving like a 20-year-old college student who is going on a gap year. He does not seem like someone who is really working on their recovery every single day, does he? I mean, he was down here in Australia absolutely getting sauced up, getting rugby tackled by the boys down at the local footy club. He will be entering that cage against a much younger, much more locked in Tom Aspinall after such a long time off, okay? Now, it's got to be said, right, that Jon Jones is the GOAT of our sport. At least there is an ongoing debate about that. It really does depend on whether or not you care about the steroid use, okay? To me, the GOAT of the sport is Mighty Mouse. To some people, it's GSP. To some people, it's Khabib. Let's put Jon Jones as one of the GOATs, and it does depend on how you feel about steroids. There's obviously the argument of, well, everyone that he was fighting was on steroids, so it sort of evens out. But there is no denying that Jon Jones is without a doubt one of the greatest to ever enter our cage. But we have to remember, everyone gets old. It doesn't matter how good Jon Jones is. He is not better than Father Time. He cannot beat the clock. And Jon Jones is going to be stepping into this cage at about 37 years old when this fight does eventually happen. His last fight was against Cyril Gane, and that went for about 2 minutes, and against a Cyril Gane who I think we can all agree has almost no ground game, right? Then he gets injured and it steadily puts Jon Jones away. So he has pretty much been away since his last extended fight for almost 4 years. And that is 4 years ago, where he looked absolutely shit, quite frankly, against Dominic Reyes. And Dominic Reyes, since then, has also gone on to look absolutely terrible. Yeah, before that, Jon Jones fought Thiago Santos, right? And from round 1 onwards, Thiago had one leg. He had a blown out kneecap during that entire fight. And it went to a split decision. Jon Jones got a split decision against Thiago Santos 4 years ago, and Thiago was on one leg, yeah? That doesn't look good, okay? Then he goes out, he wastes Cyril Gane in 2 minutes, and since then he's gone out, he's wasted Cyril Gane in 2 minutes. I know. But I'm just looking at Jon Jones' last 3 fights, okay? And I do believe that Cyril Gane, when he was in that cage, he was fighting the aura of Jon Jones, not Jon Jones the man, okay? And we all know that Ciryl Gane is a bit of a undercooked fighter, and we cannot deny Jon Jones's mind for the game. I am sure Jones knew to attack the wrestling side of that quickly and early. That is where he was going to have the best chance against Ciryl Gane. But his next opponent, Tom Aspinall, is going to be very different from Ciryl Gane, okay? Tom Aspinall is going to be a completely different fighter. Tom Aspinall now will be coming into this cage against Jon Jones. He's going to be around that peak MMA age as well. He's going to be 31 years old. He's going to be 6'5". We have just seen the two of them next to each other on a stage, and Tom Aspinall is clearly bigger than Jon Jones. Tom Aspinall didn't just grow up in a world where there was an MMA, like Ciryl Gane, where he was doing primarily kickboxing. Tom Aspinall grew up in a world, in a boxing gym, a BJJ gym. He was raised in the MMA world. He comes from a overall fighting family, and he's had his eyes on this prize since he was a boy. He's had 8 fights in the UFC, and he's lost one of them due to a freak injury. Since then, he has had that blown out knee healed, recovered, tested in the cage. Tom Aspinall has got fast hands, and he is a true heavyweight. He is not a light heavyweight that is bulked up to heavyweight and then taken a year off to go drinking. Tom Aspinall is a true, well-rounded heavyweight with incredible striking. He's got the striking of Jack Della Maddalena, except at heavyweight. In the words of Taito Iwasa, if he dinks Jones, he sinks Jones. Okay, look at it this way, right? Jon Jones was struggling in the striking against Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos. Now, let's do some of the dreaded bad MMA maths. But is Tom Aspinall a better striker than Thiago Santos or Dominic Reyes? The answer is yes, okay? So let's get into this fight, all right? Tale of the tape. Jon Jones is going to be stepping into the cage closer to 40 than he is 30. When he steps into the cage, he'll be 37 years old, apart from a 2-minute fight against Ciryl Gane, who will have had 4 years off, a devastating chest injury, and one of those years on the piss doing a world tour, okay? Against a 31-year-old, bigger, faster, and stronger Tom Aspinall. I assume that Jon Jones will immediately start to try and initiate some grappling. He will not want to stay standing with Tom Aspinall. He knew that in the Ciryl Gane fight, and I think his best chance of victory would be to try and initiate the grappling early against Tom Aspinall. Although, with Tom Aspinall being bigger, heavier, faster, and knowing that Jon Jones is going to attack him with a wrestling style, Tom will be able to post up against the cage, sprawl, get his underhooks in, and start to really use that cage as his leverage, which we've seen the Olympic wrestlers have a bit of a struggle with when it comes to the MMA side of wrestling. Tom will be able to get that nice wide-legged stance, free up one of his hands, and start to throw the elbows and those pitter-patter shots to the body of Jon Jones as they're grappling up against the cage. And using his weight and his leverage, he will be able to peel Jon Jones against the cage and push out from that grappling exchange. Now you've got Jon Jones up against the cage with Tom Aspinall in the center of the cage to his back. Jon Jones's movement is now going to be limited by the cage walls, and Tom Aspinall is going to be squaring up in front of him. Start pumping out his jabs, start pumping out those 1-2s, and Jon Jones is going to be raising his hands to protect his face from those heavyweight shots that are coming at him without any room to move and dodge. That is when Tom Aspinall is going to start working the body of Jones. Jones is going to start feeling it, get desperate, and launch a close-range takedown, which Aspinall is going to be able to use all of his skill to just throw Jon Jones to the side. Jon Jones is going to be ending up on the cage floor with Tom Aspinall in that scramble posted up above him. And Tom Aspinall will be able to start raining down some heavy ground and pound. Those hammer fists from the top. It's a title fight. So Herb Dean, he's going to be on the other side of the cage looking at something else going on. He's going to be far too away to do anything about it. But he will eventually notice that Jon Jones is getting the living piss beaten out of him over on the other side of the cage. So Herb is going to start sprinting across the cage to try and get Tom Aspinall off Jon Jones. But it's going to be too late. By then, Tom Aspinall will have given Jon Jones 3 or 4 hammer fists to the chin while Jon Jones is lying on the cage, completely unconscious. Herb Dean does eventually save Jones's life and pushes Aspinall off. Aspinal runs to the other side of the cage, jumps onto it, puts both hands in the air and starts crying. And we hear Rogan scream out over the commentary booth, "Wow, that's the scariest man in the world, ladies and gentlemen." I think Jon Jones loses to Tom Aspinall in a heavyweight fight. This isn't Jon Jones of 5 years ago. Maybe if Jones had moved up to heavyweight immediately after the Thiago Santos fight, we would be living in a different world. But Jon Jones is too old, too slow, too injured to deal with a young and hungry Tom Aspinall. I think Jon Jones has done this maths in his head as well, which is why Jones is so adamant on just saying, look at my resume, look how good I am, beating an old Stipe Miocic and walking away into the sunset as the GOAT of MMA. That is a far easier option for Jones than getting in the cage and fighting Tom Aspinall. How do you see this fight going? Do you see it going completely differently? Jon Jones with leg kicks from the outside, destroying Tom Aspinall's weak knees? Let me know down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And of course, I'll see you all in the next one.